This is the family crest of the Hontai Yoshin-ryū, one of the most revered and respected samurai dynasties in Japan. This is Soke Munetoshi Inoue. Soke Munetoshi Inoue is the 18th Soke Dai, Grand Master of Hontai Yoshin Ryu. Hontai Yoshin Ryu is one of the leading and oldest JuJutsu schools of Japan. Soke means father or head or founder. Ryu means school or style. Here he is telling us of his family's history and philosophy. The dynasty was founded in the 17th century by Oriemon Shigetoshi Takagi, a samurai warrior who served the feudal lord Kojuro Katakura. The samurais were in a way private armies of the feudal lords who kept their armed guards for defense, obviously, and to keep the peasants in order. The early samurai were men of action, a rough breed of fighters highly skilled in the arts of swordsmanship, horsemanship, and archery. They were renowned for their ability to endure pain and suffering, and they lived by the most exacting code of behavior in which the highest value was placed on loyalty to their lord. Those found guilty of disloyalty or other shameful conduct were normally given the chance to regain lost honor by committing seppuku, the more formal term for harikiri, an exceptionally painful form of ritual suicide which involved plunging a short sword into the stomach and drawing it sharply from left to right. The samurai were expected to endure this ordeal with total composure, uttering no sound and showing no emotion whatsoever. The classical warrior had little use for any system of combat that did not use weapons. This was primarily because the opportunity for unarmed combat was rare, being favored by neither custom nor circumstances, and the necessities of the time in which he functioned required him to be well armed and trained in the use of deadly weapons. A warrior, therefore, was never without weapons even when asleep, and was certainly never without his beloved sword. However, in 1635, Takagi's father was set upon and killed by brigands. So he set about devising an art, a technique, of dealing with attacks unarmed. The Japanese word for technique is jutsu. So the art became Hontai Yoshin Ryu, Takagi Ryu JuJutsu. During the following 2 centuries, the Ryu combined their unarmed, open-handed techniques with the various armed combat techniques, specifically bojutsu, staff fighting, and Iaijutsu, sword technique. It is not a prerequisite that the Soke should be a superior exponent of the art of JuJutsu, but as you will see from the ensuing demonstration, Soke Minatoshi Inoue is a Grand Master and the 18th Soke of the dynasty. The principle of the style of the martial art by the Hontai Yoshin Ryu family is based on suppleness, pliancy, bending under pressure, as a willow tree would give sway to the elements. It is therefore the willow tree that is a symbol of the Hontai Yoshin Ryu. Soke is an inherited title handed down from father to son, much like our own royalty. And the Soke is responsible for maintaining the highest standard of Bushido, the samurai code of conduct by which all warriors lived and died. The greatest honor for any samurai is to die by the sword. The sword is the soul of the samurai, the symbol of his authority and his revered constant companion. Although there were a variety of swords used by the samurai, here we show 6 of them. The samurai carried 2 swords, a long one, tachi or katana, and the short one, wakizashi, used to commit seppuku, harikiri. Though probably the most lethal swords ever invented, they were objects of beauty and much valued as works of art. Their blades were elegantly proportioned and gracefully curved, and the decoration on the hand-gardened hilt were often superbly executed in the most minute detail. The contour of the sword as we know it today varies in size from quite long to very short. The long measuring from 2 foot 6 to 3 foot from guard to point, and the short one measuring 1 foot 8 inches to 2 foot. The making of a Japanese sword was attended by the rituals of Shinto, the native religion which requires the worship of kami, spirits of nature. Daily, the swordsmith would undergo ritual purification and make offerings to the spirit shrine which stood beside his furnace. The intention was to endow the blade with magical properties which would bring a long and distinguished life to its owner. Here, Akiyoshi Yasumoto, a 6th Dan chief instructor of Hontai Yoshin Ryu, shows the parts of the sword. In this case, the katana. Kashira, the pommel. Suka, the hilt. Menuki, ornamentation. Mekuji, the retaining peg. Suba, the guard. Saya, the scabbard. Kojiri, the top of the scabbard. Sageo, the cord which ties the scabbard to the belt to prevent an assailant from taking the sword. Mune, the back section of the blade, the blunt edge. Kisaki, the tip. Boshi, the point of the temper line. The cutting edge. Yakiba, the temper line. Habaki, the collar. Seppa, washers. It cannot be stressed too much that the samurai looked upon the sword as the eternal symbol of his profession. In the hands of the kenshi, expert swordsman, ken being Japanese for sword, a finely ground and polished blade both killed and cured. Each sword is forged individually and made to order, and had to be tested for flaws and errors. Testing a sword made for the purpose of defending one's life in battle, and at times could be required to cut through heavy pieces of armor, was of paramount importance, and no samurai would accept a sword without subjecting it to a series of telling tests. Here, Soke Munetoshi Inoue is testing a blade on bamboo, which is equivalent to the resistance one would experience in cutting through human bone. In the not-too-distant past, however, they would test the quality of the new blade on live victims, usually those of condemned criminals. This event was held with strict ceremonial formality under the critical eye of the shogun, the feudal lord. If the sword did not meet the highest standards, it would be discarded or melted down to make a spear or halberd. The art of sword fighting, kenjutsu, is a highly specialized skill, and students train assiduously for long hours on the happo-giri, which means cutting style of 8 directions. They are Moroti Suki, push to the front. Hidari Ichimonji-giri, cut horizontally from left side to right, and the Miji Ichimonji Giri, cut horizontally from the opposite side. Sukyoko Jiri, cut vertically downwards. Hedari Kesagiri, cut down and across from upper right side. Miji Kesagiri, cut down and across from upper left side. Hidari Joho Giri, cut up and across from lower right side. Miji Joho Giri, cut up and across from lower left side. Here, Soke Munetoshi is demonstrating the presentation and the drawing of the sword, which is in itself a major art in its own right, known as Iaijutsu. First, however, Soke goes through the ritual of putting himself into the right frame of mind. It is most important to be relaxed before and during practice. Here, he pays homage to the sword, which to him is not merely a tool or a weapon, but endowed with mystic qualities. Not just his soul, but rather his living soul. Soke Munetoshi then prepares himself for the 4 stages of Iaijutsu, tying his sword into his belt with the sareo. The 4 stages of Iaijutsu are the draw, nokitsuke, the cutting action, kiritsuke, the removal of the blood from the blade, shiburi, and the return of the blade to its scabbard, noto. Each of these stages, as you can see, blends smoothly into a single unit of performance. The draw must appear as though out of nowhere. In effect, now you see it, now you don't. Once the sword is drawn, it becomes kenjutsu, the art of swordsmanship, and training for this involves countless repetitions of the basic movements, that is the happogiri, the 8 cutting styles, in a series of prearranged exercises which are repeated and repeated. In this first kata, watch for the sukyoko giri, cut downwards from the head. In some instances, a kata or exercise will be repeated many times daily for a year before moving on to the next kata. And now watch for the chiburi, the flick of the blood off the sword blade. This series of katas shown here are unique to the Hontai Yoshin-ryū school. In the next kata, Soke does a slight variation on the last in that he rises from the Caesar, the sitting position, and turns into the same series of strokes. The Caesar, or sitting position, is one of the most important parts of Iaijutsu. You must sit erect, straightening the neck and chest, close your eyes, put both hands on your thighs. You must be completely relaxed at this point. Here, Soke does the same Tsukiyoko Giri, the vertical downward stroke, on all three sides. Watch again here for the bloodletting flick at the end of this series of cuts. Here, Soke, striking with the pommel first and then a reverse thrust to create space for himself, goes into the Tsukiyoko Giri series again. Now we have the Michi Kesagiri, followed by the Hadari Kesagiri, the cuts down and across from the upper left and upper right. Soke Munetoshi Inoue announces the next kata. These classical exercises belong solely to Hontai Yoshin Ryu, and the routines of many are a jealously guarded secret. Here he again goes through the ritual of presentation, paying homage to his sword. Exponents of Iaijutsu and kenjutsu are traditionally required to use a live blade. That is one that is razor sharp, for unless an actual sword is used, it is impossible to generate the right mental attitude. Thus, when correctly done, the mechanics of kenjutsu bring the exponent within fractions of an inch of the sharp blade, making the performance a literal flirt with death that must be repeated thousands of times so that the sword eventually becomes an extension of the arm. And as you will see, Soke Minetoshi Inoue does not even have to look to guide the sword back into its scabbard, which is in effect a very difficult and dangerous maneuver. These kata are not attacking moves. They are responses to aggressive attacks from an assailant. And here, the iai, art of drawing the sword, is combined with the edari ichimonji giri, the horizontal cut from the left. Again, a cut on the draw, this time a Hidari Joho Giri, followed by a Sukyoko Giri, this time from a standing position. Another Hidari Joho Giri on the draw, followed by the Miji Kesa Giri, a cut down and across from upper left side. Here, Soke makes the Suchioko Giri look simple, even when one-handed. The coordination and speed in unsheathing the sword and delivering the fatal blow as a continuation of the unsheathing motion is a very skillful maneuver. These katas are designed to accommodate attacks from a variety of angles and postures. Here, Soke walks into an attack from the left, draws and turns and cuts downwards. Sukyoko Giri, followed by the Moroti Suki, push to the front. This kata shows 3 Hadari Kesigiris, cut down and across from upper right, on the draw and moving forward. Remember, this is an exercise, and sheathing the sword on each move is simply to make the exercise more exacting. This is self-evidently an attack from a variety of angles again, and Soke employs the Moroti Suki, the Suichi Giri, the Hidari Ichimonji Giri, and the Miji Kesa Giri. In this kata, we see Soke Inoue return in the middle of the exercise to a position of readiness with the sword above his head and his arms kept well back so that they do not restrict his vision to either side. Again, Soke Inoue makes space for himself at the beginning of this kata, which deals with attacks from 3 directions, returns to a position of readiness and watchfulness before bloodletting the sword. In this kata, Soke draws and adopts 2 of the readiness positions, a psychological device intended to disturb an opponent's concentration. He then executes a Miji Kesagiri and performs Noto with a reverse grip. Watch how he never takes his eye away from his opponent. The next series shows us the Hidari Ichimonji Giri on the draw, the Miji Kesagiri, the Hidari Kesagiri, the Miji Joho Giri, and Hidari Joho Giri, and a final Sukyoko Giri in quick succession. Traditionally, the Japanese likened the sword, or katana, to a bolt of lightning, one of its many mystical qualities. Now, Soke shows us the Miji Kesagiri and the Hidari Kesagiri. But here he demonstrates to us the importance attached to posture and balance. And at the end of the kata, Soke Inoue pays the traditional respect to his sword. This is Kyuichi Inoue, son of Munetoshi and the inheritor of his father's position. He is introducing the next kata, Kodachi no kata, which is the wakizashi used by Kyuichi versus the katana used by Master Sensei Yasumoto. Here they pay their traditional respects to one another before starting the kata. These are a series of exercises in which the smaller sword, wakizashi, has to take evasive action to evade the larger sword and then to attack, finding vulnerable spots in the armor which these combatants would originally have worn. It has to be remembered that these are razor-sharp blades, and as you will see in the slow-motion sequence, the stopping distance is very short. In consequence of the vast number of lethal accidents in the past, legislation has been introduced to limit katas with unprotected opponents only to the most skillful. The essential characteristics of these katas is the agile evasion and swift attack, which involves dexterity and combative balance. When in slow motion, you will be able to see Inoue cut the wrists of the katana swordsman before stepping in to deliver the Hidari Ichimonji Giri to the body. In finishing the kata, note how the contestants remain alert, never taking their eyes off one another until the weapons are sheathed and respects have been paid.
The privilege of wearing a sword, katana, was afforded only to the military classes. Although some civilians took the liberty of arming themselves with short swords, wakizashi, when going on long journeys, the majority had to make do with the bow or staff. And in this next series of katas, Soke Inoue and Sensei Yasumoto show the use of the hanbo, short staff, or jo, against the katana. Again, the technique is to evade and attack. This technique developed into JuJutsu, stick art, which is a blend of spear fighting and swordsmanship and techniques of other minor methods of combat. It's worth pointing out that the swordsman's movement will be restricted by cumbersome armor, which would increase the relative maneuverability of the jo. This is also true, of course, in the katas between the katana and the wakizashi. And as in the latter case, the points of vulnerability are predetermined by the gaps in the armor. By using the jo, Soke Inoue maneuvers himself into positions where he can employ open-handed techniques. The jo is approximately the same length as the katana and is not to be confused with the bokken, which is a wooden version of the sword used to practice kenjutsu with less danger. And in this last maneuver, the technique is to prevent the swordsman from even unsheathing his weapon and move into a headlock. Here, Kyoshi Inoue has the jo, and Sensei Yasumoto has the bokken. The bokken is carved and shaped in accordance with the contours of a real sword. In certain cases, the bokken was not a substitute, but the actual weapon. For example, if for ideological reasons a samurai converted to the priesthood and developed an aversion to bloodshed, he would sport the bokken as an instrument of pure defense. Again, the method of evade and attack is employed, bearing in mind that the bokken has a symbolic sharp edge and is used as an offensive weapon in these sequences. Although the danger of the razor-sharp edge has been eliminated in these katas, as you can well imagine, a blow from a jo or bokken are by no means painless. A blow from a weapon made from Japanese hardwood, kashi, has been known to break a metal sword and to shatter bones. The art which employs this shorter stick, as we have said before, is JuJutsu, whose main notable characteristic is the speed and high frequency of reversal of the weapon in a combative situation, thus giving the stick greater dexterity and agility, as seen in the slow motion. Anything under 5 foot was considered a jo or stick. Over 5 foot becomes a bo or staff. There are obviously a great variety of weights, thicknesses, and lengths. The definition of the staff, or bo, can be any one of a variety of elongated items, a stick, pole, club, or cudgel, and is one of the most ancient weapons known to man. The standard bow is made from white oak, which does not crush or splinter upon impact and can usually withstand strenuous blows and strikes from most bladed weapons. As you can see here, there are several different shapes which could have been derived from the protected metal strips with which they were covered to give added strength and ornamentation. Further metal adjustments turned them into spears or yari. Here are a few of these. The spear was second only in importance to the bow and arrow in early Japanese history, tempered from the finest steel and forged with the utmost care. The development of the oar as a weapon is an example of how farm implements and any article of length and strength could be adapted to develop an art form using its own special characteristics. Curved and other various shapes were also forged. From these different types of spear, there evolved the naginata, which because of its versatility was very popular with the samurai. One of the methods of using the bow, and one that is still practiced today, is the art of bow-jutsu, here demonstrated by Soke Inoue. The bow is always used with a two-handed gripping action to give it force and accuracy. It is especially accurate 6 to 8 feet from target. By the rapid changing of grips, the bow can be varied from a short length by which to lure the enemy closer to longer lengths to keep him at bay. Here, employing Suki Hazuchi, straight thrusts, Soke keeps his opponent at bay. Employing the bow, it was possible to defeat an enemy without actually killing him. Blows could be directed against non-lethal areas to subdue him. The dexterity with which Soke Inoue wields this heavy weapon disguises the fact that Japanese masters will probably train for many hours a day for a minimum of 10 years to attain a high degree of mastery of technique. Bojutsu shared with swordsmanship certain basic techniques, strikes, and thrusts, as you can see here. The positions of readiness, as with the blows, are also strongly affiliated to the art of the sword. The bow or staff may be less threatening in appearance than any bladed weapon, but in the hands of a master, such as Soke Munetoshi Inoue, the humility turns to strength, and the bow can be put to better effect than the sword, which can easily be deflected or even smashed to bits. Although the samurai never gave the bow the same respect afforded to the revered sword, it was nevertheless imperative for them to understand the techniques of the weapon. Here we see Sensei Yasumoto with the bokken, the wooden version of the sword, in a series of kata with Soke using the bow. You will see here how Soke uses the advantage of length given to him by the bow, always attempting to keep the sharp blade at a distance. The katas are a series of movements designed to improve the techniques, the skills, the awareness, the coordination by employing the strikes, parries and thrusts practiced and developed over the years. It wasn't until 1955 that the secrets of Bojutsu, not revealed for centuries, appeared as seen in this film in kata form. There are 360 fighting styles for the bow. One of these was invented 400 years ago when a Japanese swordsman, after he lost a bout with a wooden sword, retired to a Shinto temple where, after a period of meditation, he assiduously practiced the art of the bow by marrying the techniques of spear fighting with that of the minor forms of combat. He then challenged Musashi, one of the most famed, renowned swordsmen, to a second encounter, which he won by mounting an effective defense whilst penetrating Musashi's own two-sword defense. Here we see Soke marrying the Bojutsu with the mysterious art of JuJutsu, another of the samurai arts. Hontai Yoshin Ryu has always been recognized in Japan and recently in the Western world as one of the most revered and respected samurai dynasties. Today's Soke, Munetoshi Inoue, who has undoubtedly inherited all the knowledge and skill from this great school, has pledged himself to the traditional history of this Ryu. A humble and modest man, all the students who've had the great privilege to train with him during recent years when he visited Europe couldn't fail to be impressed by his technical excellence and kind and patient manner. For them, he embodies all that is good and pure in martial arts, the true spirit of Bushido.